Assalamu alaikum. This is chapter 1 in our course Public Administration. أول اسم الرسمي للكورس هو إدارة المنظمات الحكومية in Arabic. You may translate it as Management of State Organizations. Chapter 1 here, title is Balancing Values in Administration of Public Policy. It's the second video I introduced. The first one was an overview of the whole course. Chapter 1, we are introducing some introduction in the beginning of this chapter, and then as in the title we have here values we are using as the main perspective of the whole course, not only the chapter. So in chapter 1 we will talk about values, their perspective, and how they are used in managing public policy. In the introduction we will talk about why are we studying this course, and then values, how they clash, how they swing from one side to another, and we give examples for that. Then in this part we will introduce some terminologies in studying public administration. What do we mean by administration, red tape, bureaucracy, government agencies, and so on. Structure of government, legislative, judicial, and executive branches, inter-organizational agencies in the structure, and then the last point or the last topic we have in this chapter will be about the history, the evolution of approaches of studying public administration. Let's start with the first point, the introduction. Why do we study public administration, PA? Classically, we study this because we would like to learn about the management of public organizations. Do we need a separate course for that? The question is posed here because we already have courses in management. We had the principles of management in the first level in our study in the previous year, I believe, or the one before. Do we need a separate one, a separate dedicated course for management only for public matters? Yes, because public organizations differ. They have different circumstances, environment, they have some legal and political are very important dimension we have here. We are mainly there as public organizations to serve people, shop. So they differ and they need separate course. Also as well in public, in state organizations, we always look for efficiency. يعني احنا we talk about public money اللي هو المال العام. So we need to be efficient. يعني لازم نحافظ على this public money because it's people's money. So the course will help us how to become efficient in managing such organizations. Public organization help regulate private sector as well. So this is another reason why we study this course. Public organization has some distributive role, welfare role for the whole society. The role of ministries and the government, the cabinet, they supposed to look for and aim to the welfare of the whole country. So studying a course like this may aim at something like that. Also as well, public organization has a role, important one, in the development of science and technology. This is for the development of the whole organization, whole country. That was why we studied the course, the significance and the drive for why do we study that. The second point we have is about values. What is value? Value, as we see here, is something that we appreciate, something we love, something we that is priceless, or things that money do not buy. يعني احنا we value love for its own sake, so it's something priceless. We value friendship, we value something like honor, integrity, truth. These things supposedly are things that money do not buy, so it's called qiyam, values. So let's see the definition, classical definition: something worthy, desirable, as it adds something to us, to people, to organizations, something significant, and it is esteemed for its own sake. يعني love for love, truth for truth، يعني هي مقدرة لذاتها. In public administration احنا we appreciate values and we look for that because they provide social, they provide sources for the philosophy of managing such places. Public administration, they may be values, may be social principles. There may be some goals we have for the country, for some state agencies or governmental agencies. They could be standards accepted by the individual. It could be some class, organization, or society, and so on. We may adopt democracy as a value for the future. So that may affect how do we manage public organization in our country. We may look for, or we may adopt a value like building humans, building Egyptians. That could be a value for the education. It could be enhancing public human relationships. It could be enhancing psychological environment in the country, and so on. It could be anything that adopted by the government or politicians, and they demand for using them for managing public organizations. In our course, values are central for studying public administration, where they come from, how they arise, and how they are infused, implemented, and affect public policy. طبعا big deal of that come from politicians, from politics, because in politics احنا we represent people. احنا بنمثل الشعب as politicians. And we try to have some agenda that we say or claim as politicians that they represent people. So these fundamentals of politicians or principles of politicians are values that may affect managing public organizations for a specific period of time. طبعا example of public administration value may come from a very old saying, 1887. Woodrow Wilson said once, legitimate authority to make policy should be limited to elected officials, courts, and political appointees, not to civil servants. This is a value. Supposedly it means in who manages, who call, who adopt, who use, dictate values should be somebody elected from people, يعني حد منتخب, not the bureaucrats, not the employees working in a ministry. So a minister should be elected, and وكيل الوزارة or employees shouldn't adopt the values that govern the ministry or the governorate اللي هي المحافظة مثلا. This is an old saying. مفروض إن هي it affects the whole study of public administration since that time. Not only elected officials but also courts, political appointees المعينين سياسيا are the ones that should be make a policy, making a policy that come from specific values. As we see here, the example we are citing here, or we are introduce or make us talk about a very famous dichotomy. You know the term dichotomy? Dichotomy, it's the two extreme or opposing things. يعني الثنائيات, dual things. Like, for example, black and white, it's a dichotomy. Male and female, it's a dichotomy. Right and left, a dichotomy. أهلي زمالك, Real Madrid, Barcelona. And in politics and in public administration, we have a classical dichotomy, as we will see, is politics and administration. Politics mean that representing people and democracy and so on, and administration, it's the opposite. It's to look for managing organizations for efficiency's sake, away from democracy, away from being responsive, for the sake of cost effective and efficiency. We will talk more about this dichotomy later on. This means also civil servants should be politically neutral when implementing public policy. يعني it means ان civil servants اللي هم employees, classical employees اللي هم appointed classically, not elected يعني, should be neutral. المفروض ان هم يكونوا محايدين يعني when implementing public policy, because public policy should come from elected officials or from courts or from political appointees. As you see, we are talking politics a lot in our course, and it's an important flavor of our course actually. Now that we understood values, we need to talk now about the clash that happen between values. Actually, one important feature of adopting values for public administration policy is that they clash. Yani one day you have this value, and then in another day you have the opposite, totally the opposite one. It all depends on changes of values that people may see important for a specific period of time. So they clash, they swing, as we see here the board, they move between competing values. It depends on the political system. Here are examples. We may look for efficiency, and in another time we have the opposite, which is responsiveness. We may emphasize public ownership, and then we say no, we need a private ownership, that's better for our country. We maybe look for being neutral, and then we say no, we need some tolerance for some people. Capitalism and individual rights, limited government versus popular sovereignty. Let's talk about each one. These are 5 examples of clashing values, this and that, dichotomies, as we see. Let's take the first one here, of the 5 examples of clashing values: efficiency versus responsiveness. It's clear responsiveness being democratic, listening to people's demands, listening to the will, or adhering to the will of the people, اللي هو الشعب يعني. Being responsive is something good and something everybody wants, but sometimes being responsive is not good for situations where security is very important. You are in a war and you are in the army, so it's not possible that you be as a commander responsive to people. Yeah, it's a war. So in army, in police, in all things that need safety and security, you need efficiency here, right? You need discipline. So sometimes we need responsiveness and sometimes we need efficiency, because responsiveness may be costly sometimes and dangerous, right? Being responsive, for example, to students. Students would like all of them to take excellent and very good, right? But teachers and professors, they look for efficiency, not being responsive to what students want. Okay, so efficiency is the ability to produce the desired good service, or if effect with minimum of effort, expense, or waste. You lose this when you become responsive. If you listen a lot, it takes time and there are waste and so on. So these might be conflicting value. Number two, public versus private ownership. In some periods, people prefer public ownership. It is actually it's very important whenever you are talking about some utilities and something that is related to security, like army, like post office, like railroads, and so on, right? But the problem with public is that they don't compete. Management, they become sluggish and then they become slow, and all the symptoms of public management when you don't have competition. So there might be a time that people privatize public organizations to prevent harmful results for managing such organizations. So sometimes private enterprises fail and people would like to have ownership to become public again, and so on. They may swing from private emphasis to public emphasis. Number three, we have neutrality and tolerance. Neutrality meaning being equal, treating people equally, all citizens, and this is one of الانستتيوشن الكونستيتيوشن رايتس اللي هي يعني المساواة, being neutral. And in the same time there might be some tolerance. You may give some people some perks يعني مميزات أو مزايا أو كده, يعني perks أو privileges, right? Like for example, for a police officer, he or she may have some tolerance, some authority over people to do things for security reason. For a parliament representative اللي هو ممثل مجلس الشعب, he may have some perks like الحصانة, for example, and that's against neutrality. Okay, they need some protection. Yes, tolerance may be misused, but it is needed for some time. So in some situation you may need neutrality, and in another value you need tolerance. So some classes may be protected by some tolerance, and government need to have some balance between these swinging values. Number four, economic capitalism versus individual rights. In capitalism, طبعا you studied in economics, capitalism, it's having ownership of assets, production assets, and the distributions being owned by the private sector, giving lots of ownership to rich people, owned by private. That may harm the poor. So individual rights may be harmed here. Some people may not being able to have the same fortunes of the capitalists. So as we read here, can be easily harmed by such free capitalism. يعني الرأسمالية ساعات بيبقى لها عيوب يعني. So government need to regulate such conditions to protect the public against rich become richer in capitalism orientation. So these are two opposing or swinging values. Limited government versus popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty means you have big government that has great control and ownership of assets, right, and supposedly that is for serving people and protecting the rights of individuals. But such sovereignty may cause or may result in some corruption, because people working in public organizations have great power. They manage lots of big assets, and they have great authorities, so that may promote corruption, right? So if this happens, so values, other opposing values, opposite values may show up here, raised here, or rise here, which is called limited government, to fight such corruption. Limited government, يعني a government with less control, less power, right? Give more ownership to people, right? So limited government, not big ones. These are the 5 examples of clashing values we have here. The third or the fourth topic we have in this chapter is about the key concepts, some bits and pieces, يعني شوية مصطلحات احنا we will have. What do we mean by administration? We know the term is public administration. What do we mean by administration? So we say administration because we are dealing with managing, so administration is management of public affairs that is related to government and its primary institutions. We have another term called red tape, اللي هو الشريط الأحمر. Red tape is a term used whenever we are dealing with an issue or a file in a public organization that is full of procedures and paperwork and details and events, right, and lots of signatures, and so it's the excessive use of cumbersome rules, procedures, and regulations. So we may say that, oh, this file is a red tape. I mean that معقد مليان routine. So this is the term red tape. We have the term bureaucracy. كلمة bureaucracy ترجمتها in Arabic البيروقراطية. It's a term used whenever we are dealing with the administration of large organization through departments and offices and officials who follow established routines or procedures. Bureaucracy is used whenever you are dealing with an organization full of offices and desks, مكاتب يعني شغل حكومة, right? So البيروقراطية هي is used يعني حتى even the term is bureau. Bureau means مكتب, it's the organization full of مكاتب. This is what government look like, right? And we will talk about a theory called bureaucracy theory for Max Weber. It is about how do we manage, or the book or the manual for managing bureaucratic organizations. Term number 4, public policy. It's about decisions made by government to a purposive course of action in pursuing solutions to perceived problem. Okay, this is classical definition for a very generic one. Public policy, it's what government do to deal with public problems, actually. Last term or issue we will introduce in this video or this lecture is about the policy process. When we develop a policy, a public policy, we go through supposedly in our textbook into 5 stages: formation, formulation, enactment, implementation, evaluation. They are the same like the stages we go through whenever we make decisions. You remember decision making in year one in our study in the Faculty of Commerce. لما بنيجي نتخذ قرار. So we go stage one, which is studying the problem or defining the problem. This is called here policy formation. Okay, in policy formation we go through identification of a problem, as we see. But we are talking here about public policy, so it's problem related to the government concern or public affairs. Okay, and after we study the problem, we began to identifying alternatives for solving this problem, right? So it's called policy formulation. We formulate alternatives. So we discuss and define alternatives to solve this problem. So formation, formulation. Number three, we began to deal with making a decision. So it's called enactment. So authoritative agency of the government began to make a decision. It could be a legislator, يعني مشرع هنا in the parliament مثلا, for example, أو president أو cabinet أو a minister or whoever is dealing with the problem make an enactment by making a decision, and that decision will adapt a specific policy, سياسة معينة. So select the decision, the alternative here, make a decision, and then we need to put this into reality. Put this into reality يعني نحطها على أرض الواقع بقى. It's called implementation here, تنفيذ. So how do we implement? By authorizing people, by building some establishments, by assigning roles and money and so on. يعني funding, as we see here, programs, training, and so on. So that decision is translated into too many things when we implement it. After we implement, we would like to know what happened and if there are some deviations from our objectives and the decision was good or bad. And so we go through the last stage, which is evaluation. The evaluation is called the learning phase. Learning phase, it's feedback. We know what happened, and then that would enlighten the cycle again when we formulate a policy to deal with the problem and so on. So this is the looping phase that we have in the policy process. That was the key concepts we have here. The last one is the policy process. Inshallah, in the next lecture we will continue with the concepts. Thank you.